all here in the room know me, maybe everyone online doesn't know me, but I am the RAB facilitator for the Barnes RAB. This is meeting number 7. So thanks everybody for coming. I'm looking, so for folks who are online, we have here in the room, we have, sorry, we have,
shout out.
We have Lieutenant Colonel Sinclair. We have Jennifer Baker, they're both representing the base. We have RAB members, Marianne Babinski, Kristen Mello, Jane Oxen, and Kathleen Hillman, and then Capri Shaw from the Mass DEP, and Johanna Phelan, who's my colleague from Jacobs. I know online we have Colonel Holosikun, who is the base co-chair, and Chris Brown, who is the National Guard Bureau Radio Program Manager. We have a number of guests from contractors and from the National Guard Bureau. I'm not going to go through everyone who's online. I'm looking to see RAB members who are online, and I see Chris Clark.
Hello.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining. Are there any other community RAB members online? Okay. All right. Just want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask questions when they have a chance. So, Johanna, you can go to the next slide. I'll just walk through the agenda briefly. We're now reviewing the agenda, and I'll talk about sort of hybrid meeting logistics. You all have seen that presentation before. We'll do welcome and introductions. We'll cover a little bit of RAB business, and then just get into the Environmental Restoration Program status update. One thing I want to comment on, and I think it comes up probably, yeah, it's in my next slide. Go ahead. So in terms of hybrid meeting logistics, for those of you who are online, you can open the participants list. We do ask people to keep the video off. It just helps with bandwidth. Presenters, if you want, we're actually not presenting you in the room either. So for presenters, you don't need to show yourself online unless you want to, for the benefit of others who are online. For RAB members, what we do is after each presentation, RAB members have an opportunity to ask questions. And if you are online, you can scroll over your name and raise your hand to be called on to speak, and then unmute yourself. If for some reason we don't see your hand or don't call on you, please just, I think it's just Chris. So please just politely unmute yourself and speak up. For those participating from the public, this slide is not right, which I actually learned yesterday. WebEx seems to have done some sort of update and gotten rid of the Q&A panel. So for public participants, we tend to, the way we structure our meetings is the public asks questions at the end of the meeting. And so we'll just, when we get to that section of the meeting, we'll just ask you to also raise your hand, and we'll call on you to ask your question. I have turned on the chat function, so if you think of a question and want to write it in there, we're not going to answer it in the chat, but if you think of a question and think you're going to forget it and want to type it into the chat, we'll try to come back to those when we get to that section of the meeting. Next slide, please. For anybody who is on the phone, hopefully you have a copy of the presentation or are seeing it online if you have access to your computer too. You can use your phone mute button when you're not speaking and dial *3 to raise your hand, and we'll request to unmute you. Go ahead. Jennifer has. We have a question?
Yeah, I don't see a chat. I don't know if it's just me that doesn't see it.
It should look like a little bubble in the, like a little sound bubble in the lower right-hand corner.
I'm going to send a quick message and see if it'll pop up.
Okay, Johanna just sent a chat message. Did you see it?
No.
And somebody else can see the chat. Okay, well, these programs are always, they're always trying to improve, but we discover it when we use it, every 3 months, and we're like, oh, look, something changed. So if you don't see the chat, we'll just have to call on you at the appropriate time, raise your hand, or again, I could just ask people to politely take turns speaking. Go ahead and unmute yourself at the right time. You know, if everybody starts yelling over each other, which I don't expect, then we'll start to mute people, but I don't expect that. So go ahead to the next. Oh, I already. Yeah, so again, RAB members ask questions at the end of each presentation. In the room, you guys can just, you know, get my attention that you want to speak. I would ask that both online and in the room that people identify themselves before they speak. That helps us with the meeting minutes, which reminds me to tell you that this meeting is being recorded. So just be aware, and we use that to put together the meeting summary. So introduce yourself. I'm not going to keep an eye on the clock for a 2-minute limit, but the point of asking people to limit their questions is to provide everybody an opportunity to ask questions. So, and again, public participants, you can ignore the Q&A, all co-hosts part of it, and go ahead and raise your hand at the end of the meeting. Next slide. And with that, I will turn it over to Colonel Holoskun and to Kathleen for welcome and introductions from the co-chairs. Colonel.
Hello, everybody. Colonel Holoskun here again. Sorry I couldn't be there in person this time. I am out in beautiful Las Vegas. I'm sorry if I get interrupted by some jet noise, but they're about to launch a red flag here. So I'm out here doing a commanders conference. So all the wing commanders in the Air National Guard are all out here right now. And I will tell you that one of the big topics that we are discussing are the latest announcements by the EPA surrounding PFAS levels and how we are solving the problems with PFAS that we have on our installations. And I will also say that a lot of them are coming to me and asking me questions about this Restoration Advisory Board and about how we have gone about it in Massachusetts, because we are being held up as an excellent example of both relations with the community, as well as the scientific approach and going through the investigative CERCLA process. Applause to all of you on the board for all your hard work. It is being recognized at a national level for sure. Things that, again, I mentioned briefly the EPA announcement, which in the grand scheme of things is news that we've been wanting, and we've got it now, so we can start moving ahead with a little bit more science. And layered on top of that, some more good news on the TAP grant, that contract, I believe, and I think, Sarah, you can probably fill in, but I think that one is on its way to UMass right now, if it's not there already, and I'll let Sarah update you all on that. But welcome back to a board, and looking forward to a productive meeting. Over to you, Kathleen.
Thank you. I just want to say that we are an awesome group here in Westfield, all women, powerful. Watch out, guys, because we're on a roll.
Chris, it's okay.
But Chris is not there.
This is a room full of women.
Yes.
Here in person.
So watch out. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. Go ahead. So in terms of welcome introductions, this I'm not going to necessarily read everyone on the team, but you are aware of Colonel Holoskun as the base co-chair, Jen Baker is the environmental coordinator, Chris Brown is the National Guard Bureau program manager, and supported by contractors. And then our community RAB members, if you can't be here tonight. I forgot whether it was Kelly Pease or John Vilas. One of them told me they had budget meetings and he was, so he's tied up doing his other job. And then Caprice is here as our regulatory contact from SDEP. Next slide.
Can I just, Rachel Morin, she resigned from.
Okay, I'll take her off. I think you're right. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we're represented the right way.
Thank you. And Nabil has not attended.
And I just wrote a note, go and see Nabil.
Okay, so you're going to reach out to him. Great.
Yeah, he has myself a note.
Yeah, he hasn't attended in some time, maybe from the very early meetings. So, okay, great. Thank you. I'll update that slide next time.
Thank
Mary
you.
O'Connell's online, so. Sorry? Mary O'Connell is on. Oh, great. Okay. Welcome, Mary.
See, I said awesome women.
And Chris.
And Chris. Okay, next slide. And then we also are supported by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers team and the SRS Battelle team. Many of them were here in person last week, and many of them I think are online tonight. So again, I'm not going to list everybody. They will introduce themselves as they are speaking or answering questions. Next slide. RAB business, go ahead. So really the big RAB business is that we emailed the draft meeting summary to you last week, and it is posted as draft on the website. And I just wanted to see if anybody had any comments on that. Go ahead, Marianne. Did I spell it right in the summary, or do I need to? Okay. Oh, on this slide. Okay.
I just I read the thing, but Southampton, I think it was a question I had asked, somebody was answering it, it's typed in there as two separate words. I don't know if it matters, but it's not Southampton.
Okay.
It's all.
It's Southampton.
Sometimes put your William too, so we're not,
Polio?
yeah, it's like a bully.
And is Southampton as one word spelled with one H or two H's?
One,
Okay. All right.
just like
Southampton.
Northampton.
Gotcha. And I should know that. Okay.
And so is Weston.
Gotcha. Okay, we can update that in the minutes. Thank you for your sharp eyes, and now I know. We can update that. Any other comments on the minutes, Kristen?
Only that I think we're missing some minutes on the website for the, on the 104 RAB webpage. I think there are a couple of these minutes that aren't in there, but I think we did them and approved them.
Okay, all right.
I want to say July,
Okay,
but I don't, I was looking through them when we were reviewing the report, and I just, because I was looking for
right.
and I just noticed that one of them was.
Okay, I'll follow up with public affairs on that.
And I don't know if you want links to the other videos, right? Because you're going to link the video on
Sure.
there.
Mhm.
So if you want links to the original ones, I'll send you those links in the email, and that way that's all.
That'd be great.
That's it.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, upcoming meetings, we meet the fourth Thursday of each month, every 3 months, and make adjustments as needed. So our upcoming meetings are scheduled for July 25th, October 24th. Now in January, I think it's the fourth Thursday is actually the 23rd. But I'm gonna recommend that you consider pushing that back a week because the way, I've forgotten, I can look, but the way the first of January is on a Thursday, so there's a good chance that that whole first week is kind of a non-work week. And so I'm just, we don't have to decide tonight unless you want to, but I would propose that you consider moving that back to the 30th.
2024.
2025, yeah, that's a typo. Sorry. Yeah, that should be 2025, my apologies.
I think you're probably right. I think looking at the calendar, I think you're probably
Okay, are folks in line seeing the slides properly?
Yep, I can see them.
Okay,
Yep, I see the slides.
okay, it's just my screen. I'm still in the opening slide. Okay, all right, so January 30th, 2025, not. Okay,
and Mary Ann noticed the connection.
we don't have to run by Robert's Rules of Order. I didn't hear any other comments on the minutes or you thumbs up, or are we good with the minutes?
We don't have to.
We don't have to, okay. I wanted to ask you about the meeting location. Are we comfortable continuing to meet here? And I'll tell you the reason that I asked is because after we had made the reservation, I was contacted by the head librarian who wanted to make sure that we were good with this room because it's not accessible. And I said, oh, good point. We did meet for at Westfield State, but we just did decide that we liked meeting here. We've never had anybody contact us to say, oh, I can't come to the meeting because it's not accessible, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you ever heard of anybody that, we obviously don't want to prevent anyone from coming who would want to.
No elevators.
I assume not. That's what they told me.
Well, there's an elevator on the other side of the building, but I don't know. Is there somehow, is it like locked from there and here now?
I don't know. They run. I was just at something that was down here, so what happens with their event?
Yeah, I mean, it has, we have advertised it as accessible prior.
I'm stumped.
Yeah, I mean, we have.
Maybe there's is there any construction going on temporarily?
Main floor, you can get from the parking lot to the main floor, Great Hall or something. Not to this, I don't think it comes down. The elevator, it's on a lift, wheelchair lift.
But I'm just saying that they run meetings down here.
Here?
Yeah.
And claiming that it was,
I was
claiming
just
that it was accessible, yeah. So that's news to me, because we rented it out thinking it was accessible before and with the information. So maybe it's not right now, and there's also, I mean, there's a room up there, like, we haven't had a full room of like, 50 people before.
Right.
There's a conference room at the airport there as well. It's like tech ready.
There's an elevator to get up to, it's a second floor.
Uh-huh.
Yep, there is.
Yes,
It's a nice facility.
and there have been other companies, we have that one, that held a public forum
Yeah, you can rent it out.
to be there.
So we did it one time.
I've been there for meetings before. There was a big, when the airport did their thing.
Well, when we toured, didn't we meet there first?
No, we went to the parking lot,
Oh,
been on the bus.
Anyway,
Oh, yeah, we didn't go inside.
so there,
I was-
like, the only reason we weren't meeting at the airport before was because it wasn't on the bus line.
Mhm.
But if we're talking about going up to the college, that bus line is only during particular hours anyway.
Well, it sounds like the first thing I need to do is get back in touch with the librarian and say, really?
And well, no, I mean, that's information that everybody.
Yeah. Well, I didn't follow up with whether that's a temporary thing or something.
That would be interesting.
It says it only goes to the Great Hall.
It's by the stairs.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
It only goes up one floor.
That's what it said, goes to the Great Hall.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Okay.
They're right.
And there isn't a room on that floor for meetings.
You can meet in the read room. You can meet in the gallery.
So there are meeting rooms upstairs, probably not as, sounds like maybe not as big as this one though.
How many people drove there? So. Then the bus route is not the limiting factor.
Right.
Is all I'm saying.
So when you say there's no bus route at the airport, that means.
Right.
Second floor.
Yeah.
There is a bus that travels between, no, I don't know if it goes to the airport, but it's to, college.
We don't have anybody that needs the bus.
And if somebody needs to buy out.
Yes.
If you need transportation, please contact Kristen.
Right.
Yeah, no, nobody should be missing them, unless they can dial in, so nobody. should
Right,
be
that's right.
missing.
That's right. So am I hearing that we want to follow up to make sure this room's not accessible as our first choice? Do we
I
want
think
to?
we're good. I think we're good.
You think we're good? Okay.
But if you want to meet at the airport, that's fine too.
I'm comfortable continue. I'll tell you, every time I show up to a new place, I get nervous, especially with hybrid meetings, I get nervous. Because I don't know how the sound's gonna work, or they're like, oh, yes, we have a sound system, and then they don't really have a sound system. And these folks do really have this lovely little thing here in the middle of the room that's called an owl. That seems to work well. So if you're happy here, I'm happy here. If you ever hear, however, of anybody that feels like they can't come to a meeting, of course, we want to make sure we change. Okay, moving on then, we'll stay here. Okay, I am not the person who knows a lot about the TAP. I don't know, Chris, if you plan to talk about this or if you'd like Lieutenant Colonel?
Yes, I can
Okay.
cover this one. So for
Great.
the record, Chris Brown with the Air National Guard as the RPM. Sorry I can't be there today because my wife is active duty and she is also traveling. It kind of bums me out because I do enjoy my trips out to Westfield. But moving on to the technical assistance for public participation, we've done really good with our first one, and we have a little bit of work left to do. According to the CFR, there is a RAB reporting requirement. So, and it's really simple. It's kind of like Project Closeout to us, but it's just an informal report, basically getting words from the RAB members and the community members. So those of you sitting in the room, sorry I can't be there, but I need your words that says how you are satisfied with the product you received from your TAP grant service.
Okay.
It can be a really informal letter. Informal could be an email, but just something simple that, you know, says, this is what we asked for, this is what we got, and, you know, if you were satisfied or not, because we would like to be able to improve this process further on down the road. And no one asked for this report last year because we were still in the middle of it, but there is a RAB data call that comes towards the fall. It's kind of towards the end of the fiscal year. So that's why I wanted to bring this up.
Chris, I think that I saw a draft of that come in from Kristen literally like 4:30 today, something like that. And
all right then.
So,
and Kristen never does anything simple. It's always precision.
I was thinking on the right address because I didn't want to screw it up. So we. And then we edited, and then I had other people read it.
I think that's fine. And obviously, Chris was getting ready for this meeting and wasn't checking his email late in the afternoon. So we may have even been on sound checks by then, but I did see that come in. So Chris, you can take a look at that. And I think Kristen, when she submitted it, said, you know, please read this and make sure it covers what you need.
So I sent it to you and Kathy and the Colonel. So we.
Oh, that's why. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's got it. That's why, Chris. So you didn't see it.
Sorry, Chris. I didn't know it was supposed to come to you too.
That's all right. The installation can review it first. It's perfectly fine.
Okay, so it is in. That's why it didn't come to you, Chris. I didn't notice who it came to. And so she submitted that this afternoon. I don't know if you need to hear any words from the RAB members that are in the room or online, but she did put in, there's a little section about how people felt about it.
Okay, that's very helpful because it's good to know if we get asked. And as the Colonel mentioned, we are looked at. There's been lots of questions related to TAP grants. They're all coming to Barnes to get the answers. And from different services, I mean, if you go look in the public record, when I was doing it, the last one I could find that's on public record was Griffiths Air Force Base in 2010. So you guys were able to get something through that hasn't happened in a very long time, and you're about to go after your second one.
It's kudos to Kristen, and I'm sure she's getting calls from other RABs as well. How do we do this?
We have a lot of different RAB members have connected, you know, via the internet and various of like we've been working on this. So that not only that, but they will also get a copy of the closeout so that they know how to do it too.
Fantastic.
And if you find that you need it, I was thinking while I was writing it that if we wrote it in a Google Doc with comments, we could annotate to say what goes where and why it's there and what other people could do. And that way it would be like instructions more than just a template. If that's something you want, like I don't work for the DoD, but if it would be useful, I will do that because it's, you know, easy and I've heard it. And what was the other part? Yeah, they have been asking. Yes, we did share everything that we have done with people and how to do it. And if there's any issue with that report, just let me know because it's completely flexed.
Right, and you didn't have another example to follow, so.
Yeah, no.
That's right.
Like what is it, CFR, whatever the thing is, and just, I made what they required titles, and then we filled it in, and then
There
I
you go.
texted everybody and was like, on a scale of 0 to 100%, satisfied are you? And, there were, some people did want, like a one-pager handout that was in layman's terms and easily translatable, like by Google. So because we didn't ask for that in the tab, and so it
Right,
wasn't in the
wasn't in
scope.
the scope.
Chris Clark and I are gonna fix that up, and we'll help with the next one for that too, because the one that is already approved doesn't have that in it either. But we'll work with that expert, and then in our next application, we will add that together.
Okay,
And it's just like a simple, like, one-page handout of what the take-home messages from the tab were.
great. Okay. All right, so Chris, that's underway.
All right,
Uh,
setting the standard.
There you go. So you want to go on to FY24 TAP grant?
Yes, and we did brief this last time, but unfortunately there were multiple continuing resolutions, and if you recall, this competes against other fiscal priorities, and so until we were able to get a budget approved, it took a little while to get funding rolling. So the funding was finally approved, and we were put on the spend plan, and funds have started rolling as of April 16th. And so base contracting has received the funds and is working on the actual award. And if there are questions on that piece, that's where I would turn it over to our contracting experts.
Any other further comments on that?
You guys need anything from us?
I would probably just like to talk to you afterwards about this take-home page, because it's not too late to try and add that into my PWS.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, but I have to get it in.
Right now. Okay. And Mary was the RAB member who brought it up, so if she is still online, we can, include her thoughts as well.
Great. Okay. All right, next slide, Jahan. Sorry, taking notes. There we go. Okay, any further RAB member discussion on what we've covered so far? Kind of did that informally anyway. Go ahead, Kristen.
I have one more tap thing. I don't know if we can do it at the meeting or if it can be done by email offline. But at the last meeting, I seem to recall Chris Brown talking about how the end times could be more flexible. Like the completion date on an application. And so since you also said that it would be good if the application could be sent in for the July meeting with the vote in July, because the next fiscal year rolls around in October. Then if I know how to write the request with that flexible end date, so as not to limit ourselves the way we did with the work with Dr. Bout, then that way I can have it ready for July so that the materials can be there and then we can have a vote at the meeting and then everything can be turned over to the Colonel. Is that more?
So you're asking for guidance on how to write that with the flexible end date, or?
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, the end date, I was only ending at the end of the fiscal year, right? Do you just not write it? Just leave it off?
Sorry, I'm nodding my head. This is Lieutenant Colonel Sinclair. The basic thing would be is that the end date is negotiable. We'll work through it. So it really comes down to when you get it awarded. And I have 1 year from the date that it's awarded to do the services. So what you're looking for is in the next fiscal year. So if you put it in, and correct me where I go wrong, Chris, is that if you put it in for July to get voted on so that it's ready for FY, the next FY, that's the money that you're going for that. So you don't have to worry about the end date, because we'll negotiate that, everything else based on when we get it awarded and how much it takes for them to do the work.
Okay, excellent. And that way nobody ends up like hamstrung on some particular date, just like get it out. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Okay. Anything else from RAB members before we move on to the environmental program updates? Okay. Moving on, anything from, I know we've got Chris and Mary online. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Okay, All right, so turning it over to you, Chris Brown, on the Environmental Restoration Program status update.
Okay. So we will try and go over a few things, and Kathleen asked for this information just before, and we were getting ready to send out the slides, and at that same exact moment, the headquarters sent down this information. So this is pretty much from the top. You've all been waiting for the rule to be established with the MCLs. If you track the Federal Register, it's supposed to be published, I believe, tomorrow. And that's where all federal regulations get updated and they go out to the public. So for those of you that track that, that's where you can go find it. You'll see that it is regulating and making enforceable levels for 5 different PFAS with a hazard index for a mixture of PFAS. That's those bottom 2 bullets there underneath the established MCL rule. And that it provides 5 years for the regulated drinking water purveyors to comply with these MCLs. The next bullet here about DOD implementing these standards at all DOD-owned drinking water systems. This one, we don't have that particularly here at Barnes, but this is a overall, kind of like a public affairs slide here. And when we move into the MCLs, they are also used as cleanup standards and can be used as risk triggers for short-term actions. That's kind of the newest information. It's going to go out on the Federal Register, and then there'll be like a 60-day window when it becomes effective. And so I'm sure there'll be more guidance coming down for me to pass on when we get our instructions on how all this applies within our programs.
Okay.
So we can go on to the next slide. And with that, we're going to move into our remedial investigation update. And we're kind of getting ready for the UFP QAP. That was something that you guys wanted a TAP grant for before. It's a really big, long set of words for the Uniform Federal Policy Quality Assurance Project Plan. And it's that formal document that describes in detail what we're going to do and how we're going to approach the investigation. That is a document that you will get a chance to review, and a little bit later that's why I have that template. Since we're going to be reviewing it, I can provide you a little bit of training. I'm a resource to get you information as well. So I will try and help you along the way as giving you pieces of information so that you'll know where to look in this document, because I understand that, looking at environmental information is sometimes like trying to read a menu at a foreign restaurant. But that should be coming late this fall, so I can possibly get more information about UFP QAPs into the next RAB as well meeting, if that's something you would like after you hear what I have to say in the following slides. And then you'll see that we're also, once that gets going, we'll be working towards our field work at getting out there and doing some sampling, and our Patel personnel will be able to show you some visual aids that we did not have at the last meeting to make it a little more clear as to what we meant that we were going to go out and do and where we were going to do it. Can move on to the next slide. Here's our restoration calendar that I've used to help with the TAP grant explanation, fiscal years versus calendar years. If there's any questions on that, yes, it has been mentioned in different places that it could be helpful to have a TAP grant application coincide with the beginning of a fiscal year. It does help with programming, sequencing, going after funds, and Lieutenant Colonel Sinclair gave you the other details about when we get it awarded and how we can negotiate the timeframes. But those orange ovals are our windows of funds that we have to go after that $25,000 for the TAP grant. And as I mentioned, you'll see the UFP QAP with your review timeframe kind of scheduled down there later in the fall. There's really hasn't been any change to this calendar, but it is a good visual to help us keep track of where things are, because I know when I speak about money and times, unless you have a visual, it's just a bunch of words and you can get lost. Next, is there a question?
I thought it was.
Okay.
I thought it was supposed to start in the spring and summer, the drilling in the land.
The RI fieldwork?
Yes, the field work. So I thought it was summer, spring and summer of this year. I thought that was the last time we talked.
Oh, no. 'Cause it-
No, I don't recall that. It's
All 24.
Yeah, we gotta freeze the clap before they can drill, and we won't get the clap till the fall.
Okay.
mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Next slide. And I do remember there was a couple RABs ago that everyone was like, what is a UFB quap? And I kind of gave a brief introduction to that. And everyone was, we wanted the TAP grant because we didn't know where to look or what to do, and no one's seen it before. So here's what a template of like the table of contents for a quap and what it looks like. Little green, like I mentioned, to help with my foreign language called environmental restoration. You go to the very top, you'll have acronyms and abbreviations that'll help get you into the same vocabulary. And then I've highlighted some worksheets that I think would be the most pertinent. You're welcome to look at the whole entire thing, but when you're like, where do I look? Where am I interested in? Most of your questions throughout the time that I've gotten to know you have come around like the conceptual site model worksheet 10. And that gives you the detailed description of the region, the history, the setting, the reasoning on why we're going to go investigate an area, and the description of the pathways and receptors. And that's what the conceptual site model that you've been asking for, that's where that falls into play. And then the data quality objectives, that is worksheet 11, and that gets the reasoning behind how we're going to sample, the approach that will be used, and the goals that we want to get with that information that's in there. And then there is a whole lot of other worksheets that are more like protocols in my mind, to simplify it, that helps everybody with quality assurance, making sure that everyone's doing what we needed and it's all in play. And if I get this out of line, I know Amanda and Jen will straighten me out for the worksheets that are listed in the yellow box. And if we go on, this is a really big book so I have another slide with the rest of the table of contents that I wanted to highlight. Well, there's a lot of notes. So worksheet 17 and worksheet 18 are two more places to look, and that gives you the rationale on where we're going, because that was part of your questions in the last meeting. Where are you going to go, sample, and what are you sampling? And that gets covered in worksheets 17 and 18. If you read those descriptions we got there, it gives you the types of samples, the locations, the depths. It gets into the soil, groundwater, sediment, and all the different types. And if you have questions about this is where I would pause, because after this, we just talked about soil samples and where are we going to go. The next few slides is going to be for showing the maps and areas of that. So if you got questions about the UFP quap, now would be a good time to talk before we roll into the maps.
Are we gonna get the whole format? Like, it's not paper, right? Like, we're gonna.
Right. So Chris, the question was from Kristen, are they gonna get it in a digital format? I know for another base, I just went out to the RAB through DoD Safe because it's a huge file. But DoD
Yes,
Safe
it is huge.
A transfer protocol that allows you to be able to have access to that file. Is that how we would do this, Chris?
Most likely, because it will be large, so we'll probably have to do a DoD Safe type file exchange.
And searchable?
And Kristen's asking if it's searchable. It's a PDF. That's would be
Sometimes
sent.
video a full photocopy and then make it a PDF, and then it's a piece of.
Right, then they're pictures.
No.
It's going to be, so I'm asking if
Right.
it's going to be a usable file.
Yeah.
And I know that that sounds kind of
Yes.
good for a reason.
I know. Yes, I understand because you've had to deal with converting 1990s paperwork into today's paperwork. But
Yeah.
So,
No,
so the
it
answer is
should be
yes,
searchable.
it should be a searchable file.
Thank you.
Yeah. It should be a regular PDF, but it will probably be large.
Okay.
Do you think that we'll see it by October? Like, will we discuss it at the October meeting? Is that late fall, or are they calling like, December 18th?
I'd have to ask Amanda on the actual schedule, because there's a lot of reviews that they do through the documents as well. Amanda, do you have an idea of schedule?
I'm pulling that up now for you, Chris. I will have an answer momentarily.
As long as we know by October.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when we get to the point where when we share it with Mass DEP, we'll be sharing it with you at roughly the same. Hopefully everything goes at the same time.
Can I ask a different
Pending
question?
any issues with DoD safe.
Chris Clark has a question also.
Chris, go ahead.
Hi, hi everybody. So just checking in. Will the remedial investigation team also be checking in with our community expert, Dr. David Bell? Will he be consulted on any of the planning for this?
No, his Dr. Bout's involvement ended at the end of the TAP grant. I mean, it's not on us to continue to share with that. I mean, I don't have a problem if you guys reach out on your own, but I mean, I'm not as, yeah, that's just that was the end of that TAP grant.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry if that didn't really completely answer your question, but it was
Chris,
a little
the
confusing.
RI team has a copy of Dr. Bout's report though, right?
Right. And so with the TAP grants, you're supposed to take the news that you learn, whether it's good or bad, from the reports. And if there is information that can be gleaned from a TAP grant, you're supposed to find a way to incorporate it into your restoration program. And so with this one, when Dr. Bout did his study, we saw his comments and we saw the information that he had provided. We shared it with the contractor who's going to be working on the RI, and they were able to look at it as well. It's used when kind of like as we go through the historical records review, just, we add that as another document to review and incorporate if any of the suggestions are noteworthy to be included. So it didn't just go become a project and then it's a report sitting on a shelf. It's used.
Thank you. That was kind of my question. I appreciate it.
Yes, but our ability to continue to involve him ended at the end of that contract.
Okay, thanks. Caprice has a comment or a question?
Caprice, Mass DEP, I think I brought this up before, but is that copy of Dr. Bout's report available either within the minutes, or I have like the slides, but I don't have, an actual report. And I was curious if that's available.
I think we put it on the website, but if on
In the email, and I can forward it to you if you want it. I can send it to you again.
I'll look for that.
Yeah, December 21st.
Okay. And I can double check.
I looked it up for the report. It's only there because
And and if it's not on the website, we can add that.
Yes, it's currently not on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably should put it on the admin record too, because then that's a website that'll always have it. So
Yep.
While we're still waiting for the calendar information, do we know if, have the National Guard and DEP met to discuss, the situation for the off-site private wells? That Dr.
No,
Brown
not on
has,
my end.
so there are residents in Westfield who are on private wells who have clearly been impacted by the AFFF use update. And some of them were, much higher and they already have carbon filters, and some were under the 20. But all that's going to need to be reevaluated and discussed between the DOD and the state. And I mean, technically speaking, that's none of my business, but they are Westfield residents, and so it is our business. And so if we as the RAB could encourage DEP and National Guard to talk about that.
So I can just share, Mass DEP has been, so the homes that were over 20 parts per trillion for the individual sum of the 6 that we currently, that's our standard now. We did put POET systems on, and we have been monitoring, we collect samples, both raw and the treated sample, to make sure those POETs have been removing the PFAS from the drinking water. And we've been collecting quarterly samples. Staff actually just went out recently to, collect the sample with our contractor, making sure those systems are still active and doing what they're designed to do. I will say that since the health advisories, I'm having staff kind of look at all properties that were tested to see how it relates with the new health advisories. And that's what we're doing on our end. But I do hear you when you say we should talk about those offsite properties.
Jennifer from USACE has her hand raised. Okay. All right, Jennifer, and then Marion. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead,
Since you're recording this meeting, I'm wondering if there's a recording of the meeting where Dr. Bout presented. Because we've read the report, but it might also be, there might be more.
There is. Yeah.
Yeah, I recorded it. It's on YouTube, and I can send that out. If Amy, do you want me to send it to you?
Yeah.
And then you send out?
Yep. Sure.
All right, then I will send links to where I know the report is and where because RAB is hosting the report online too. So we're hosting on YouTube the videos, and I'll send everything.
Okay. All right, great. And Marianne, you had a question?
Just since you brought up the private wells there, I know, is the Mass DEP, they're doing the, back to do the testing, which they did when it was dropped to 20. I know they revisited any household that was close to 20. We have a link on the city website that gets us access to the reports, and they come out and the household that they visited and what they did. So is that's still happening here?
I mean, anytime we go to a house and we collect a sample, we are required to submit that sample and the results to the homeowner, and it's in a form of a notice of environmental sampling letter. And in that letter, we also have the lab data sheets. And so that is uploaded to the site file. The RTN is 1-2-009.
Well, I
probably
wanted it repeated for people to.
Yeah, that information, it's not only shared, but yeah, it's uploaded to the site file.
So are they going back to private well owners just that were tested before? Originally, they were tested when it went with 72.
These are the homes that we put point of entry.
Okay, so there's other homes.
So I have to look back at the data. So right now, Mass DEP's standard is still at 20 parts per trillion.
Right.
If that changes, which we haven't heard yet, I know it's under consideration with the new advisory. If that changes, that would be a message that we would receive, whether or not we would need to revisit those homes. But I'm not sure we haven't had that discussion yet, so I really can't answer that question, but these are the homes that were at 20 and above that we put public systems that we were monitoring.
So are you considering, or is there a possibility that homes that were originally
That's
tested?
So right now, our standard's still 20.
No, I mean, not even for the 20, but that were never even tested because they didn't think that there was any reason to do that.
I'm not sure.
Because I know I had them add, people who were concerned and contacted me, and they hadn't had their homes tested at all. They didn't fall on the list or whatever that the DEP was using. So then the DEP did go and test some of those because of the concerns that those residents had. So is there a possibility that there might be other homes out there who should be?
You know, I think if there's any homes out there that are concerned, you know, with what's happening, if they want to contact me, I'm sure my contact information, I'd be happy to talk to them, see where they're located, and then, you know, bring that to my supervisor. Absolutely.
Well, who lets them know this?
Well, if they contact me, we can have that discussion.
Well, how do we?
Well, this is where your role is.
How did the Board of Health in charge of private well?
The board of health are in charge of regulating private wells.
Right. So go through them to get them to reach out to private well owners.
Yeah, and this is where, you know, since we've had this conversation with Caprice and who's saying you can contact me, this is where your role as community liaison would really help. Where you take what you've learned here back out into the community and let people know.
Absolutely.
So,
If it's any consolation, two variant questions. This is Kristen, by the way, for people online. In working with private well owners in another municipality, what I know is that those private well owners who were benefiting from DEP's private well sampling all got a notice about the new federal limits that last year when they first came out, letting them know that at some point, when the federal limits came out, Mass DEP would be meeting it or better.
Oh, when it was 70 parts per trillion?
No, this is I want to say the letter came out either in March or August of 2023.
Okay.
And I'd have to look it up to know the actual date because I haven't looked at that. But it came out very recent, in the last 12 months, and they said that we're expecting these federal limits to come, and when they do, this is what it is. We're not in charge of your wells, but you need to know that, this is based on 20, and that's this other thing. And these numbers will mean something different to you then, and so just heads up. Now, because we weren't part of that program, because we didn't have, we don't have like 60% or more of our people on private wells, we were only tested what was, affected by the base. And originally they did like this stepped out radius, right? But I think that radius might be different if people go back and revisit it based on Dr. Bell's report. So maybe when you go back, you can say, here's this other report after they went through everything, and do we need to revisit? And that would address your issue. If we can get loud, we let people know and talk to Board of Health like that, we can make sure we can get that. And that's, sorry, I'll do it.
okay, thanks, Kristen. All right, so we weren't officially on the RAB question page, but that might be the next one. I'm not sure what the next slide is, Chris. Okay,
Nope,
go
next
ahead.
slide is to turn it over to Drew to provide some more visual about our next part of the work with the field work and where we are looking at.
Great, and Drew, could you reintroduce yourself to everyone, please?
Yeah, sure. This is Andrew Barton calling. We're speaking here. I am with the Battelle SRS JV. I am the project manager that was hired by Army Corps of Engineers to do the PFAS RI at the site. So if you remember during the January RAB, we discussed the RI sampling approach in general. And as Chris noted, the RAB asked if we could include figures during this meeting. So accordingly, we prepared 3 figures to show proposed PFAS RI sampling areas for soil, and then for surface water and sediment, and also for groundwater. And this map right here shows the proposed PFAS RI soil sampling locations. So as you can see right here, this map includes the 6 AOCs that were initially identified for evaluation in the PFAS RI. Those are shown in magenta here. And when we compare the data gap study that was recently completed, that study recommended inclusion of an additional AOC, which is AOC 2. And that was recommended for inclusion because AOC 2 was a fire training area, and use of that may have overlapped with the time frame of AFFF usage at the base. So we're including that as another AOC at the site.
Okay, Drew, this is Amy, sorry to interrupt you.
Yep.
The visual that's on the screen is a little fuzzy to read. Which one is AOC 2?
AOC 2 is a large circle in the middle of the yellow.
The bottom right.
Yeah. Bottom right.
Bottom right.
Below that circle. The bottom right circle or the bottom left circle?
Yeah, correct, right there, the bottom right.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Go ahead.
Yep. Okay. So I also want to point out that the black dots on this map represent the site investigation soil sample locations, and the dots with the white crosses in the middle represent ESI soil sampling locations. And the green shaded areas represent the extent of the proposed RI sampling areas that will be used to delineate the spatial and vertical extent of PFAS in soil. Now, the actual locations within these shaded areas is based on ESI and SI results, and that'll be shown and included in the QAP. We still need to deliberate that and discuss those actual sampling locations with Army Corps and National Guard, and that will be included in the QAP as proposed sampling locations. Okay, next slide shows the surface water and sediment sampling locations. So on this figure right here, the yellow lines represent surface water locations where surface water and sediment samples can be located, can be collected. Armbrook is the yellow line located to the west of the runway, and Pondbrook is the yellow line located east of the runway. These converge and eventually flow into the Westfield River. And I did want to point out here too that the runway kind of acts as a surface water divide. So surface water that falls to the west or the left of the runway will flow over to Armbrook, and that which falls or to the right of the runway will flow over to Pondbrook. So similarly on this figure, we've shown ESI sampling locations. The blue squares represent ESI sediment sampling locations, and the black triangles represent ESI surface water sampling locations. So during the RI, we're going to collect more samples from these surface water bodies to understand the spatial extent of PFAS in surface water and sediment, and that'll also help us understand the interactions between groundwater and surface water at the site. And again, these actual locations are going to be determined over iterations when we review this with Army Corps and Air National Guard, and those will be presented in the QAP. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this map shows our proposed groundwater sampling locations. In the ESI, there are several groundwater flow direction maps, and those all indicate the groundwater generally flows from north to south at the site. The blue circles on this map represent existing groundwater wells, and these small raindrops here represent public water supply wells. And the green shaded areas here represent areas where we're going to perform vertical aquifer sampling of groundwater. And vertical aquifer sampling is really the first phase of the RI. What that entails is that we'll drill a boring at each location and collect several different samples of groundwater at different depths, help vertically delineate PFAS in groundwater. And that'll help us create a vertical profile of PFAS at the site. And that's really important here because groundwater at the site can be between 100 and 250 feet thick. So we have to not only understand the spatial extent of PFAS in groundwater, but the vertical extent as well. And when we collect this vertical aquifer sampling data, we're going to assess that data to determine the spatial and vertical placement of permanent monitoring wells at the site. And those permanent monitoring wells may be within these vertical aquifer sampling areas, or they may be without these areas. It really depends on what information we collect and what the profiling tells us. And the reason we do this vertical aquifer sampling is the monitoring wells that we're going to install really only have about a 10-foot screen. So we not only have to know spatially where to put those, but vertically where to place those. We're monitoring the maximum PFAS contamination in groundwater. And again, the vertical aquifer samplings locations, we're again working with Army Corps and Air National Guard on those, and those locations will be presented in the QAP. So these maps just kind of show the general locations. Once we have those identified, put those in the QAP, and those will be available for your review. And I think that's it on proposed RI locations.
Okay, then we'll go to questions from RAB members.
Mrs. hand is already raised. Go ahead and let it.
Thank you very much, Drew. That was great, very informative. I just have two quick questions. The first being, has the group decided which testing method they're going to use to estimate PFAS in the samples?
Yes, we are using EPA method 1633.
Awesome.
Yes.
And then this may be kind of a more simpleton question. Was there a reason why I understand that the direction of flow was from north to south? Was there any interest or consideration put into sampling like I see that there is one groundwater monitoring well on the north side, but is there any other considerations for including any other kind of like upflow, like upstream or above flows to measure any potential PFAS contamination that might not be emanating from the base or from emanating from other sources on the north side?
Not at this point, Chris. I think we're going to, kind of evaluate the results from this vertical aquifer sampling, and then we're not necessarily ruling that out for later phases. But at this stage right now, we're just going to perform this vertical aquifer sampling, kind of evaluate the results that we'll see, and then we'll propose locations for actually permanent monitoring wells in the future. And those areas are to be determined really based on the results that we see from this initial investigation.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks, Chris. Other questions from RAB members?
Let everybody else go first. I will not.
I'm looking at Kristen and she's letting others go first.
Go ahead, guys. You want me to go? Okay. So are we sampling up by Hampton Pond? Is there an assumption here that there's no effect on Hampton Pond?
Which one is Hampton Ponds? Or like
The
on the
water body?
the water body up in the right hand, upper right hand corner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we not?
Could you, I have a little trouble hearing that question. Could you go back one slide to the water location?
The question is, are we not doing any sampling up near Hampton Ponds, which is the one up in the upper right-hand corner?
Horse Pond, Buck Pond, we're not, I mean, there are some that are right off. Well, people have even across, like,
Yeah,
Horse
that pond is highlighted as one of the potential proposed surface water and sediment sampling areas on the surface water and sediment slide. But I did just want to clarify that, the sampling locations right now, like Drew did mention, the sampling locations aren't finalized at this time. So, we're showing you a preliminary snapshot, but it could be adjusted in the QAP based on the internal review that we're going to go through.
Okay, and so the slide we have up right now is the groundwater and aquifer sampling one, but you said that's a possibility on the surface water sampling, surface water and sediment.
Right, so
could you go back one slide, Joanna?
Water though, I mean, if you were going in that direction, you would test everything in that direction.
Go back the other way. There we go, surface water and sediment. Yeah, so those, the yellow lines are around those ponds on that one.
Yeah.
So could you explain why, so I think the question in the room is, why would you sample for surface water and sediment there, but you're not proposing it for groundwater sampling, at least at this time?
I'm going to jump in. This is Amanda Martin from the Corps. So there are a couple permanent monitoring wells that already exist in that general area. They're the blue dots you can see on the groundwater and vertical aquifer sampling areas. So there are a couple of wells that do already exist, and it is part of the plan to eventually install permanent monitoring wells on the up gradient side of the runway as well.
Okay, thank
So
you.
even though it's not shown in, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were, you know, that the entire plume was being monitored around. I just didn't want to do only south, that's all.
Okay. Chris Clark wrote, thanks for all your work. Thanks, Chris. Any other questions from the RAB right now? Kristen, another question?
Yeah, when you go out and sample, are these gonna be on, public ground, private homeowners? Like, how are you gonna, where are you gonna access and how? Like, what kind of interaction? How does that work?
Yeah, I can answer. This is Amanda Martin with the Corps again. I can answer that. So we haven't put exact dots on the map yet because we're still in the early phases of the plat process. But once those dots are placed on the map, we will prioritize public rights of way if they're available in the, near the vicinity of where we need to sample, just because that will make access easier. But if we need, we'll use our GIS specialists to compare the locations we need to collect samples to parcel data for Massachusetts and determine if any of them are on private property. And if they're on private property, our real estate division will be reaching out to each property owner to ask for what's called a right of entry. And that document would clarify why the government is requesting access to someone's property and what we would be doing on their property. And they would have the ability to either grant that access or deny that access. And they also have the ability, if they do grant access, to revoke it at any point in time. So that's something that the Corps of Engineers will be handling when we're a little bit further into the process. We'd be reaching out to each individual property owner.
And one more. If it's found that Armbrook and the sediment in the Armbrook Reservoir contain PFAS or concerning levels of PFAS, are DEP and the National Guard and Army Corps of Engineers in connection with NRCS who are planning to redo the Armbrook Dam? Right, so there's this.
Who's NRCS?
With National Conservation. They're the dam people. They're the dam.
Okay. That'd be the DAM, dam people.
Federal program and then they're rehabbing the dams. And
Okay.
we have two flood control dams up there on the left-hand side of that map, right? One is at Armbrook and one is further south at Powder Mill Brook. And the thing is, if the runoff from the left side of the runway went there, and it was the left side of the runway where for many, many, many years that plane carpet sat when my dad was the medic, right? And they like lit it on fire, put it out, lit it on fire, put it out, right? Over and over again. That's on the left-hand side of that runway, which means that surface water, whatever there was of it, would end up in our brook, which means that the people redoing the dam and the military doing the remedial investigation need to talk to each other. Right, isn't it NRCS, Marianne?
It is. Chris Clark put in here, it's the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that.
Alphabet soup.
Right, so no, I just mean that there are other federal actors in town, and I want to make sure that you guys are all talking.
Because that's happening in the summer.
I don't know when, because of the money, but I know that if PFAS went into that they're gonna find it, around the edges of the sediment, whatever. And when you do, there are gonna be people working there and y'all need to talk to each other. And so whatever your people need to call your people, I don't know.
Could you point out where on the map?
State people need to talk to the
Break out
federal
the song now.
Kristen, can you show us on the map where they're asking? Is it this one over here?
So, yeah, that's Armbrook and that's the reservoir. And so there's a dam and a spillway here. Yep, where you're looking.
Are you seeing that online with the cursor?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see that there that's near where some location or some samples were already taken in the ESI, and the sediment samples were non-detect.
Okay.
But now
The
you're
water
doing it-
samples were detected, but the sediment samples were non-detected.
That's a different test.
She said the water samples were detected, but the sediment samples were non-detected. Kristen, what did you just say?
Instead, you're using a whole different test now.
It's a different testing method?
That was, I believe, modified method 537, but it is very similar. So
It's missing.
I would not expect different results between the two methods.
So what would be the process? Is there, now that this concern has been brought up, is there a way that we would, that the National Guard Bureau would be, contacting them or the Army Corps of Engineers? Is there any process in place or that could be put in place to make sure that any necessary coordination happens?
I'm not aware of any process per se in that specific region, but I have no problem reaching out and just asking questions to figure that out and go, hey, by the way, is there a process? Is there something I'm supposed to be aware of? I can look into that.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Just so you all have like situational awareness of each other's work. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if everybody heard that. Kristen's just saying, just so everyone has situational awareness of each other's work.
And Caprice too.
Right. Other questions from the RAB? And then I think we open it up to any public questions as well. Mary Ann.
Yes. So this is just our clarification for me, this alphabet stuff in.
Right.
That's the surface water that you're testing. We'll see that.
These are, well.
And then the next map, where was you gonna sink vertical well monitoring?
Right, and in the UFP.
Sample areas are in the, what I'm seeing is yellow there.
Right, these are the general areas in which they will be doing the groundwater sampling, and in UFP QAP will have specific areas.
You find a place to do a monitoring well? Take
Multiple ones.
Multiple. I know, because I live right near there.
That invitation.
So Mary Ann, she volunteers to have a well on her property.
Gotta bring those phones if you're coming to my
Put that in a minute.
So that's a pretty good big area there, but that's what we had talked about.
But the UFP QAP will have more specifics on where they're proposing to sample within these areas. They're just showing you at this time, while they're developing that document, these are the general areas.
This area also goes over the two city properties, which is the schools, elementary school.
Yeah.
And that's, and that left area, is that air conditioning?
It is chilly in now. It is chilly in there.
That's when I started losing my voice, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Some people think it's.
So just to emphasize, I know you mentioned the elementary schools, just so everyone's clear though, this is where we're talking about groundwater. So it's underground. There's not exposure to the elementary school children. Presumably they're not exposed to groundwater at the school.
Groundwater though on that field that are used to bubble up from the ground.
Okay.
Because it gets flooded on the track area.
At the intermediate?
At the intermediate.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions or comments, and we'll open it up. We've had lots of RAB member comments, and they may think of some more questions, and that's fine. Are there any other public participants online who have any questions or comments? I thought Chris had his hand raised, but it went away.
Yes, I just, sorry, I have another semantic question, I'm sorry. For this, for the, surface water sampling, has there been a determined method for the depth of surface water sampling? Like, are we measuring water that's directly like on the surface, or are we measuring like 6 inches under the water or 3 feet under the water? I would like clarification on that.
I think we still have to hash that out during our QAP review. I think we typically propose the center of the water column, but we have not finalized our plan yet. So we might have to get back to you on that question once we get a little further along in the process.
Thank you, Amanda. Just because PFAS acts like soap generally, so I would feel very strongly about sampling on the direct surface. That's all. Thank you so much.
This is Dan Folan with the Corps. I mean, normally if it's a surface water body that's moving like a river or stream, you would sample below the surface. But if it's a stagnant water body like a pond, you would typically measure, like you said, at the surface interface, air-water interface.
Right, so this is Kristen.
Thank you.
The thing about it is that PFAS prefers to not be in oil or water. So you'll get the functional group head sticking into the water and the PFAS preferentially being at the air-water interface with the hydrophobic and sticking up. And so the reason Chris is saying, we need to make sure you do surface sampling is that if you only test mid-water column, you're even in a moving body of water, even in a river, you are going to miss the PFAS because it will preferentially be at the air-water interface. And if you need references to that, we can find you tons of references for that.
So this is Jennifer Appel, USACE chemist, and that is very true. But in a water body, the air-water interface is such a small amount of area in comparison to the volume of the water that's within the noise of our analytical precision. This really comes into play when you have the formation of foams at the surface of the water, because there's a lot of air-water interface there. It also comes into play in the vadose zone, where again you have a lot of air-water interface that happens in the vadose zone in the soil beneath ground. So if we saw foams on surface waters, this would be very important for us. I don't know if anybody in the community has ever seen such a thing.
Yes.
Okay, I would love to know which water bodies you see that in.
I've personally seen it in the Westfield River, and I believe Hampton Ponds.
As it gets warmer and it starts to be spring, they're all going to be out there hiking around looking for foam.
Yeah, no, if you want to know where, you're talking to a group of people who will go out and collect their own and have it sampled for you. So we're recommending that you take a lot of samples in a surface water body and that you do it in a lot of different places so that you fully characterize. Because if it only goes in one place and it's only in the middle of the water column, you're gonna hear about it a lot. That's all I'm telling you. If you only look where it isn't, you're gonna hear a lot about the quality of the work you're doing. And everything you said is absolutely true. And Chris and I 100% believe you, and we know that the data zone is completely undersampled. And we have friends in Michigan that collect the foam too, and Chris collected foam, and people in Florida, right? So we are happy to look everywhere, but we want to make sure that we sample the surface as well as the other areas, because if we skip sampling at the surface, we know we're not looking for PFAS.
Okay, those comments I presume will be taken into consideration as folks are working on the OPQAP. Other comments or questions? We are doing great on our timing. It's 7:21 and I have 7:25 for our closing remarks. So we've got a couple more minutes. If anybody has any other questions for tonight's meeting. Okay, I'll move on to closing remarks from our co-chairs. Anything else? Any closing remarks from Kathleen or Colonel Hoskins?
I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And the more information I learned, the better I am to understand this whole process. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Capri Shaw has a comment.
I just have, I'm looking at your contact information, and since that time I've given you that information, it's changed.
Okay.
So my cell phone number is 413-540-6253. And then it's caprice.shaw@mass.gov, mass.gov. And that number there was a landline and it doesn't exist.
Okay. 413-540-6253.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then mass.gov. And then it's the same caprice.shaw@mass.gov.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. So we'll update that on our next slides as well. Okay. Colonel Hoskin, any closing remarks?
Thank you, everybody. Another great meeting. It's great to see the community participating, asking the hard questions. That's exactly why we're here. And that's exactly why your input is important to this process. So looking forward to moving into the co-op and getting the field team out there as soon as we can. But thank you, everybody, and we'll keep pressing forward.
Okay, thanks. Do we have any slides after this one? Websites. So we'll just put that up. There's a whole bunch of websites for everyone who got this electronically. That'll be a lot easier because you can click on the links. But we do provide a number of websites that have Mass DEP's PFAS information, the RAB rule handbook. So there's a number of websites there. And so with that, we'll go ahead and close tonight's meeting, and we'll see everybody again in July. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for everybody online. Appreciate your participation.
Yes, here, right?
Yes.